Alan Greenspan and famously fought with Paul Ryan during an interview that they had in Congress. And Paul Ryan comes out and is like, wouldn't it make Social Security more solvent if we privatized it, made it savings accounts? And Alan Greenspan said, that really wouldn't do a thing for us because ultimately we can spend as much money as we need. There's no issue with creating as much money as we need. The issue is, do we have the real resources for sale to absorb that spending? So I want to take it back, and I'm going to do something I rarely do, which is kind of defend at least an idea. Biden has failed miserably as I read off that list of everything he has not even tried to do or has not done. But one thing that he did say was that in part of this infrastructure bill was they were going to invest strategically in capacity planning to enable us to compete, to make us more productive so we can eliminate those bottlenecks in the supply chain. Now, he's a lot of talk. I haven't seen any evidence it's going to happen, but I want people to understand that is exactly why when people are laughing, how is he going to tame inflation by spending money? Well, you spend money targeted to enhance the productive capacity of the nation, to increase our productive sovereignty, to allow us to be able to do those things. Talk about that for just a minute, because I think that this is another one of those moments where a smarter, more informed activist community is going to be able to do a lot more damage to the establishment and the oligarchy if they are actually packing real knowledge versus just, wooden swords and, face masks made out of cardboard. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is what we've been saying in the MMT community for years now. In order to tame the actual sources of inflation, you have to do two things. One is spend more, not less, strategically in key areas to increase the productive capacity. So you don't have shortages, so you don't have bottlenecks, so you don't have to rely on global supply chains. So that's where spending more actually reduces inflation. The mainstream will tell you if you spend more, it will cause more inflation. So that's point number one. And the good news is that you create jobs and you become more resilient to global shocks, pandemic shocks, shortages, and all of that. That's one aspect of it. And that's the aspect that Biden in a way is understanding. The second aspect, which is not, I doubt he's going to do anything about it because this is where the establishment lives, which is taxing and regulating abusive market power in key areas where we actually have inflation pressure points and had inflation pressure points. And that's where it becomes a question of democracy. Where is this abusive market power? It's the 5 global companies that control food prices. It's the speculative behavior on Wall Street to speculative and commodity prices. It's the pharmaceuticals. It's the health insurance industry. Are you going after those? Well, if you're going to go after them, you also have to kind of introduce a Medicare for all so that you increase productive capacity and bring down costs and so on. This is why we had the thing, what is it called? A Green New Deal that had those 4 features in it, which is spend more to decarbonize, to tax and regulate abusive market power, to create a affordable housing, homes guarantee program, to include Medicare for all, to go after the power and influence of pharmaceuticals and health insurance companies. That's why we've had a whole program called the Green New Deal, because it wasn't just the favorite shopping list of the progressives. It was well-designed economic strategy to tame the sources of inflation, decarbonize and transform the system, and produce millions of jobs in the process. Now, who's opposed to it? It's the handful of politicians we send to Washington, D.C., their lobbyists, the super PACs that support them, and the media companies that spin their stories. Who are the consumers of those stories? It's unfortunately a lot of progressive and well-meaning people who are not well informed, who have been bamboozled into a narrative that says we can't afford any of this pie in the sky Green Deal thing that they talk about, as Nancy Pelosi or whoever one time said it. So that's why I'm all for the revolution, and I'm all for the pitchforks, and I'm all for the rebellion of Chris Hedges and everybody else. But it's not sufficient to have pitchforks. You have to have well-informed pitchforks so you can push back and call their bluff when they say we can't afford your thing.
I want to raise this point, and then I'm going to move on to another aspect of this. One of the things that we see is a frequent rush by a lot of well-meaning progressives, and they want to do a constitutional convention, not understanding that the Mount Pelerin Society, the Chicago School, the libertarians led by the likes of Milton Friedman back in the day and others, the Powell Memo, on and on and on, they have been praying to God that we are dumb enough to beg for a constitutional convention because they are prepared to kick our asses. They have been tackling state houses, the Republicans or the conservatives. More, forget the Democrats. I'm not, folks, when I talk about this stuff, I'm not like, oh, I love you, Democrat. I'm telling you, strategically, they have targeted the state houses. They have targeted the judiciary. They have targeted this stuff at the low level, and they have literally blanketed across the country this readiness for a constitutional convention. And one of the things they want most is a balanced budget amendment. You get a balanced budget amendment, you may as well kiss your ass goodbye, because there's no way we're solving climate crisis. There is no way you're getting health care. And there's absolutely zero way you're getting free college or anything like that. So if this happens, it's disastrous. And so there's a lot of things that we've debunked on this show alone. I mean, my God, if people are listening, they're walking around filled with armaments ready to go to war in the revolution, the mental revolution, the intellectual revolution. That said, what I'm wondering here is this: as we watch the rhetoric of Joe Biden, as he demonizes China, as he demonizes Russia. Now, mind you, these are not innocent people here all the way. There's all kinds of crazy geopolitical stuff going on. But whenever the U.S. decides to call someone an enemy, my first thought is they're probably not the enemy. They're probably not the enemy. And that's terrible. I hate that I have to look at my own government in that way. But if I'm not mistaken, the idea here of demonizing them allows us the air cover, if you will, to spend money to defeat the enemy, just like we did in World War II, just like we did during Reagan's Cold War, just like we did throughout this. We need an enemy to make the Republicans be okay with spending, and they still haven't okayed it. So what exactly is it that you think is going on in Congress today that is happening as they're demonizing these? Did I get that right? Is that what we're looking at? Or is there a legitimate geopolitical angle here that we're not seeing? Because obviously the Ukraine is a major oil producer. There's a lot of stuff coming out of Russia. You know, I'm trying to figure out, because I know that petrol is a key component to rising inflation. If they change the price of gas, they change the price of everything, because everything is made with petroleum in it.
Well, I mean, in the case of Russia and the Ukraine, as far as Europe is concerned, it's really the natural gas as a major resource. But also the Ukraine is a major food producer, a major exporter of wheat and sunflower seeds and things like that. So there are some very important geopolitical dimensions to that conflict. But, you know, money is in the background too. So the influence that Russia has in the region, and in Europe in particular, has to do with the fact that Europe is really desperate for alternative sources of energy. And right now, Russia supplies them with a significant amount of natural gas. Russia also has some very serious national security concerns from their perspective. If we had, you know, a large presence of Chinese or Russian troops in Canada or in Mexico, we'll be panicking. We'll be pushing back the same way the Russians are pushing back the presence of the U.S. and NATO in the Ukraine. So those are real issues, and they're not going to go away unless there's serious negotiation between both sides to de-escalate the situation. But unfortunately, what we've been seeing the last few weeks, with the exception of the last couple of days, is mostly escalation on both sides. So diplomacy is what ends these things, and diplomacy is what's going to calm down the situation. Now, when it comes to the U.S., I don't really understand why the Biden administration is trying to escalate a conflict in that part of the world when we can barely manage the crises that we're dealing with right now here in the U.S. with the pandemic, with the inflation situation. The only thing I can think of is an old trick that politicians used in preparation for an election or re-election. And I hope and pray that it's not the case, but it certainly looks like looks like it. And it's not going to distract people from the inflation concern. It's not going to distract it. I mean, the idea that, kind of playing the patriotic card with finding an external enemy all of a sudden is going to convince my neighbors here that they should vote for Democrats and not Republicans, and not worry about their paychecks, and not worry about inflation, and not worry about the COVID situation. I think it's a very dangerous strategy and ineffective strategy at the end.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.